In a single morning, my wife stood beside another man and took away my dream, my name, and my future. She thought she had won, but she forgot one thing. When you destroy a good man, sometimes you awaken something even stronger. The morning fog clung to Lakewood like a secret it refused to tell. I remember the exact sound my truck tires made rolling over the frost-cracked gravel, the sharp bite of autumn air, and the faint, comforting scent of pine resin still lingering on my sleeves from the night before. I had driven to Ravenwood Works just like every other morning, expecting the familiar creak of the old barn doors and the quiet satisfaction of another day, turning scrap wood into something meaningful. Instead, yellow police tape fluttered across the entrance like a scar. 2 squad cars sat silent in the mist. My chest tightened before my mind could catch up. Vesper stood just beyond the tape, arms folded tight against the cold. Beside her was Bennett Crowe, my business partner, the man I had trusted with my dreams for 4 long years. His face wore the right amount of sorrow, but his eyes looked too steady. Quill. Vesper's voice broke as she took one hesitant step toward me. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, shoulders curved inward, the same woman who used to trace the calluses on my hands and whisper that she loved the way I built things with nothing but heart and stubbornness. "They came at dawn," she said softly. "I tried calling you. I swear I did." Bennett cleared his throat, his tone measured and heavy. "Quill, this is difficult. The auditors found large, unauthorized transfers. They're claiming you diverted funds from the workshop accounts. The board acted quickly. Ravenwood Works. It's been transferred to new ownership, effective immediately." The words landed like a slow, heavy axe splitting green wood. I stood motionless in the swirling fog, boots rooted to the frozen ground. My hands, these scarred, wood-stained hands that had patiently guided 17 lost boys through sanding and carving and believing in themselves again, hung heavy at my sides. This place wasn't just a workshop. It was the second chance I had carved out of my own failures. The refuge where kids who had been thrown away learned they could still create something beautiful. And now, it was being taken from me, right in front of my eyes. A small crowd had begun to gather in the mist. Mrs. Harlan from the diner, old Mr. Whitaker leaning on his cane. A couple of the young men I had mentored last summer stood near the back, their faces shifting from confusion to something colder. Doubt. I felt their stares like splinters under my skin. Vesper reached out, her fingers brushing my sleeve. I pulled back instinctively. Her touch, once warm and familiar, now sent a chill racing up my arm. "Quill, please," she whispered, eyes glistening with what looked like real pain. "I never wanted you to find out this way." I looked at her, at Bennett standing just a little too close, at the way the fog seemed to swallow the edges of the workshop I had poured 8 years of my life into. Something deep inside me fractured, not with a scream, but with a quiet, terrible silence. This wasn't just business. This was the woman who had shared my bed and my future, standing beside the man who had just helped bury everything I had built. And in that frozen moment, a single clear thought cut through the numbness. This story is about the deepest kind of betrayal, the one that comes from the person who promised to stand beside you. But it's also about how the quiet kindness you give to others can become the strongest weapon you have left when everything else is taken away. The days that followed blurred into a haze of cold silence and whispered rumors. I posted bail in the late afternoon, the metal door of the county jail clanging shut behind me like the final nail in a coffin I hadn't seen coming. My truck smelled of damp wool and old coffee as I drove the back roads home, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the old house made me flinch. Vesper's side of the bed remained untouched, her pillow still carrying the faint trace of her lavender shampoo. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the moment in the fog, her hesitant step toward me, Bennett's steady voice delivering the death sentence to everything I had built. By morning, I knew I couldn't just sit and wait for the world to finish burying me. I started small, quiet. Mira Solace was the first person I called. She had worked at Ravenwood Works for 3 years, handling orders and keeping the books with a calm precision I had always admired. When she answered, her voice was low, careful. "Quill, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to reach you yesterday." We met at Elias Hawthorne's cabin on the edge of the woods, far from prying eyes. Elias was 72, the man who had taught me everything about wood and patience when I was 23 and angry at the world. His hands were gnarled now, but his eyes remained sharp as ever. He poured me a cup of bitter black coffee and studied my face for a long moment. "You look like a man carrying ghosts, son." I told them everything I knew. The police tape, the accusations, the way Vesper had stood beside Bennett without quite meeting my eyes. Mira pulled out a worn notebook, her fingers trembling slightly as she opened it. "I've been going through the old records. Something doesn't add up, Quill. There are signatures on transfer documents, signatures that look like yours, but the dates, you were out of town on half of them." Elias leaned forward, the fire in his wood stove crackling softly. "And the land deals." I heard whispers at the lumber yard. Someone sold detailed maps of the old-growth forest behind the workshop, the pristine stands we always protected. The truth came in pieces, each one sharper than the last. Over the next few days, we dug deeper in secret. Mira stayed late into the nights, cross-referencing bank statements and emails she had quietly backed up. Elias used his old contacts in the timber industry to confirm what we feared most. Vesper and Bennett had been working together for months. They had forged my signature on documents authorizing the sale of sensitive forest location data to a large logging corporation. In exchange, they received substantial payments funneled through accounts that made it look like I was the one skimming from the workshop. The consequences were already unfolding. Large sections of the protected forest were being clear-cut under the cover of night. The boys I had taught, the ones who had found pride in creating furniture instead of getting into trouble, were losing the very materials they needed to keep working. Jobs dried up. Hope faded. One afternoon, I saw young Caleb, the quiet 17-year-old I had pulled off the streets 2 years ago, walking on the opposite side of Main Street when he spotted me. He froze for a second, then quickly turned his head and kept walking, shoulders hunched against the wind. That small rejection cut deeper than any courtroom accusation. At night, alone in the house that now felt too big and too empty, the weight of it all pressed down on me. I kept seeing Vesper's face in the fog, the way her voice had softened when she said my name, the way she had let Bennett speak for both of them. How long had she been lying to me? How many nights had she lain beside me, planning this while I dreamed about expanding the workshop, about giving more kids a chance to hold a chisel and feel useful again? The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't a single explosive fight. It was slow, intimate, carried out in the shadows of our shared life. Every memory of her laughter, every quiet moment we had shared, now felt poisoned. Mira noticed the change in me during one of our late-night meetings. She placed a gentle hand on my arm, her voice barely above a whisper. "Quill, you're carrying this alone, but you don't have to." I looked at her, at Elias, at the small circle of trust I still had left. The anger was there, simmering beneath the surface. But beneath the anger was something heavier, a deep, aching grief for the life I thought I had built with the woman I loved. And somewhere in that grief, a colder resolve began to form. This wasn't over. The silence that followed those secret meetings grew heavier with every passing day. Customers stopped calling. Orders that once kept the workshop alive dried up overnight. The phone rang less and less until it fell completely quiet, like a heart that had simply given up. I watched from the window as a trucks that used to deliver fresh lumber now drove straight past Ravenwood Works without slowing down. The for sale sign that appeared on the front gate felt like a final insult. Even the town began to turn its back. Old friends crossed the street when they saw me coming. Conversations died the moment I walked into the hardware store, and then came the moment that truly broke something inside me. Elias Hawthorne called me one rainy evening. His voice on the phone sounded tired, almost ashamed. "Quill, I'm sorry, son. Some folks are putting pressure on me, saying it's not good for my reputation to be seen with you right now. I need to step back, just for a while." The line went dead before I could answer. I sat alone in the dark kitchen, the rain hammering against the roof like angry fists. Elias, the man who had believed in me when no one else would, was pulling away. The last anchor I had left was slipping through my fingers. That night, despair wrapped around me like thick smoke. I poured a glass of whiskey I didn't even want and stared at the faded photos on the wall. Pictures of smiling boys holding their first finished pieces. Pictures of Vesper and me on the day we opened the workshop, her arm around my waist, both of us believing the future was ours to build. Everything I had poured my soul into was crumbling, and the woman who once promised to stand beside me through anything had helped light the match. I hit the lowest point 3 days later. I was sitting on the back steps of the empty workshop, rain soaking through my jacket, when Mira found me. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside me on the wet wood, close enough that I could feel her presence, but not so close that it felt like pity. The rain fell steadily between us for a long time. Then, softly, she spoke. "You're not alone in this, Quill, even if it feels that way right now." I let out a bitter laugh that sounded more like a broken cough. "Look around, Mira. Everyone's gone. Even Elias. My name is poison now." She turned to face me, her eyes steady despite the rain running down her face. "I know what they did. I've seen the emails, the forged signatures, the money moving in circles that lead straight back to Vesper and Bennett. But I also know the man you are, the one who never gave up on those boys even when they gave up on themselves. That man is still here." Her words landed gently, but they struck something deep. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a small spark flicker in the darkness. Not hot rage, not blind fury, something colder, clearer, a quiet, burning resolve. "I don't want revenge the way they expect," I said slowly, my voice rough from disuse. "I won't destroy them with fists or screams, but I won't let them win either." Mira nodded, a faint, determined smile touching her lips. "Then we do it the right way. Smart, patient, with truth instead of violence." That conversation became the turning point. In the weeks that followed, I moved carefully. I began gathering every scrap of evidence Mira and I could find without drawing attention. Old hard drives, deleted emails recovered in secret, bank records that told a story very different from the one being whispered around town. And then I made one quiet phone call. Harlow Finch answered on the second ring. She was the most respected investigative journalist in the county, known for her integrity and her refusal to chase cheap scandals. When I told her I had a story that involved betrayal, stolen futures, and the destruction of protected forest land, she listened without interrupting. "Meet me at the old mill tomorrow night," she said simply. "Come alone, and bring whatever proof you have." As I hung up the phone, I felt the shift inside me. The heavy despair that had nearly drowned me was still there, but now it had company. A cold, steady flame had ignited in its place, not the fire of destruction, but the fire of clarity, of purpose. I wasn't fighting just for my workshop anymore. I was fighting for every boy who had learned to believe in himself here, for every tree that had been cut down in the dark, and for the man I refused to let die inside me, the one who still believed that kindness, when protected and used wisely, could become the sharpest blade of all. The game had changed, and for the first time since that foggy morning, I was no longer just surviving. I was preparing. The weeks that followed my meeting with Harlow Finch moved like shadows, slow, deliberate, and filled with quiet danger. I began reaching out to the young men I had once taught at Ravenwood Works, not with grand promises or pleas for help, but with simple, honest messages. One by one, a small group started to respond. They came quietly, usually after dark, sitting with me in Mira's small apartment above the old feed store. Caleb was the first to show up. The same boy who had crossed the street to avoid me weeks earlier now sat across from me, hands fidgeting with a chipped coffee mug. "I was scared," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Everyone said you stole from us. But I remember what you did for me when no one else would. I'll stand up if you need me to." Others followed. Marcus, Tyler, even quiet Jonah, who rarely spoke more than a few words. They were no longer frightened boys. They had become young men carrying their own scars, and somehow, they still remembered the man who had given them a chance. Their willingness to speak the truth became pieces of light breaking through the darkness. Mira worked tirelessly beside me, her loyalty never wavering, and Harlow Finch proved to be exactly as sharp as her reputation suggested. One rainy evening, the three of us gathered around a single laptop in Mira's living room. That was the night we found it. Hidden on an external hard drive Vesper had left behind in a storage unit, a drive she thought no one would ever discover, were hundreds of emails. Detailed conversations between her and Bennett Crowe. Plans, money transfers, maps of the protected forest marked with exact cutting zones. Every piece of evidence we needed was there, saved in cold, calculated detail. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My chest felt tight, a mixture of relief and fresh pain washing over me. Vesper hadn't just betrayed me in a moment of weakness. She had planned it carefully, methodically, while sleeping in our bed and kissing me goodnight. Harlow leaned back, her expression grim but determined. "This is enough to bury them, Quill. But we do this clean. No leaks, no revenge theater, just the truth." I nodded slowly, though my hands were shaking. The final piece came on a night when the rain fell in sheets, turning the dirt roads into rivers of mud. I drove alone to the edge of the devastated forest, the same ancient stand of pines that had once stood tall behind the workshop. The air smelled of wet earth and fresh-cut wood. Chainsaw scars marked the land like open wounds. Bennett Crowe was already there, standing under a temporary shelter, smoking a cigarette as he surveyed the damage his greed had caused. When my headlights cut through the downpour, he straightened, surprise flashing across his face. I stepped out of the truck, rain soaking me instantly. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't clench my fists. I simply walked toward him, the small recorder in my coat pocket already running. "Bennett." He tried to smile, but it came out twisted. "Quill, you shouldn't be here. This is private property now." I stopped a few feet away, letting the rain fall between us. "I know what you and Vesper did. The forged signatures, the forest maps, the money. I have all of it." For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. He glanced around as if expecting someone to save him. "I'm not here to fight you," I said quietly. My voice remained steady even as my heart hammered. "I'm giving you one chance to tell the truth. Right here. Right now. For the boys whose futures you helped destroy. For the land you helped ruin." Bennett laughed nervously, but the sound cracked. "You think this changes anything? Vesper and we covered every track." I looked him straight in the eyes, rain streaming down my face. "Then why are you shaking?" The silence stretched, broken only by the relentless rain. In that moment, something shifted inside me. The burning need for revenge that had kept me going suddenly felt different. I realized I didn't want to become like them. Bitter, destructive, empty. Forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was the only way I could walk away from this storm still holding on to the man I wanted to be. Bennett's shoulders slumped. His voice, when it finally came, was low and broken. It was supposed to be easy. She said you'd never find out, that we could blame everything on you and walk away rich. I stood there, letting his confession pour out with the rain. Every word he spoke was being recorded. Every admission another nail in the lie they had built. When he finally stopped talking, I turned and walked back to my truck without another word. As I drove away through the storm, tears mixed with the rain on my face. Not from victory, not yet, but from the painful clarity that the woman I had once loved had been willing to destroy everything, including me, for money and power. And yet, in the middle of all that darkness, I had chosen not to let hatred consume me. That choice felt like the first real light I had seen in months. The courtroom was quieter than I expected. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the wooden benches. I sat near the front, hands resting on my knees, trying to keep my breathing steady. The air felt thick with anticipation and unspoken regrets. Harlow Finch had done her job well. Her series of articles had spread through Lakewood and beyond, laying bare every email, every forged signature, every acre of forest that had been sacrificed for profit. One by one, the young men I had taught stepped forward to testify. Caleb spoke first, his voice trembling at the beginning, but growing stronger with every word. Marcus and Tyler followed. Even Jonah, usually so silent, stood tall and told the judge how the workshop had once given him purpose. I watched Vesper from across the room. She sat very still, her face pale, eyes fixed on the table in front of her. For a brief moment, our eyes met. In that instant, I saw something raw, fear, shame, maybe even a flicker of the woman I once knew. She looked away first. Bennett sat beside her, shoulders slumped, the confident mask he once wore completely shattered. The judge's gavel came down with a final, heavy sound. Guilty. Both of them. Guilty of fraud, environmental destruction, and theft of property. The sentences were read clearly. Years behind bars, restitution to be paid. The courtroom exhaled as if the whole town had been holding its breath for months. I didn't feel the rush of triumph I once imagined I would. Instead, a quiet sadness settled over me. All those years, all those shared dreams, reduced to this cold, final moment. When the courtroom emptied, I stepped outside into the crisp autumn air. The compensation money arrived weeks later. Not enough to rebuild everything exactly as it was, but enough to begin something new. I chose not to reclaim the old workshop. Instead, I used every dollar to create the Ravenwood Legacy Center on the edge of the recovering forest. A place where young people could learn sustainable woodworking while helping restore the land that had been wounded. The first building went up slowly, piece by piece, just like the old days, with honest hands and patient hearts. One quiet afternoon, as I was sanding a cedar beam outside the new center, two unfamiliar cars pulled up. A man and a woman stepped out. Thorn Ravencrest, Vesper's younger brother, and Callista Ravencrest, her older sister. They approached slowly, as if unsure whether they would be welcome. Thorn spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. "Quill, we read everything. We had no idea how far she had gone. We're sorry, truly sorry for what our sister did to you. And to this town." Callista's eyes were red-rimmed. She looked at the half-built center, then back at me. "We can't change what happened, but if you'll allow us, we'd like to help, any way we can. Time, money, whatever you need. We owe you that much." I stood there for a long moment, the sandpaper still in my hand. Part of me wanted to send them away. Another part, the part that had survived the betrayal, remembered what Mira had once told me. Forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing not to carry the poison anymore. I nodded slowly. "Come back tomorrow." There's plenty of work to do." They both looked relieved. For the first time in a long while, I felt the weight on my chest lighten just a little. Then came Elowyn Vale. She arrived one spring morning as a volunteer coordinator from the county's youth restoration program. From the first day, she moved through the center with quiet grace, helping the boys plant saplings, teaching them how to read the grain of the wood, listening more than she spoke. We talked often, at first about the work, then about deeper things. She never asked for details about the scandal. She simply understood pain without needing the full story. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, she turned to me and said softly, "You didn't let the darkness win, Quill. That's rarer than you think." Her words stayed with me. In her presence, I began to understand that real kindness isn't something that can be stolen or destroyed. It only grows stronger when it's tested. Months later, I stood in the middle of a young forest that was slowly healing. Soft green needles swayed gently in the breeze. The air smelled of fresh earth and new growth. A small group of boys, some new faces, some familiar, gathered around me as I demonstrated how to properly hold a chisel. Their eyes were focused, full of the same quiet hope I once carried. I looked up and saw Mira watching from a distance, smiling. Elias Hawthorne had returned too, sitting on a bench with his old hands resting on his cane. Thorne and Callista worked side by side with the boys, their presence a quiet redemption. And Elowyn stood nearby, her hand resting lightly on my shoulder for a moment, before she moved to help one of the younger kids. In that moment, the pain of the past didn't disappear, but it no longer defined me. When everything is taken from you, what remains is the choice you make, whether to let bitterness consume you, or to stand back up and give again. I chose to give, and somehow, in giving, I found more than I had ever lost. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe. Leave your thoughts and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure, but every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audio-visual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.